Perfect. Thank you so much, Maggie. Thanks to you and the rest of the Lightspeed crew. It's awesome to see some of you here. Some folks from my past, like Terry and Robert, are people I've worked with at various stages in my career, and it's really fun to see you both again. And there's probably some people here that I've missed as well. But let me share right now, and we'll get this started. All right, hopefully everyone can see this. I do want folks to use the chat throughout here because I want to make this session as interactive as possible. My idea behind this, and I've done this a couple of times with the lean startup portion of it without the AI side for multiple groups. And the whole idea really is to take that little idea that you've got in the back of your mind that you might want to get started, but you haven't found any time to actually do that, take that and like actually get it started today. So if you don't have one of those, that's okay. I think this information is still really valuable and you can use it in the future. But if you do, like this is the perfect time and the perfect space with the perfect group to start kind of taking that from just idea to actually getting started. The other thing I want to say right off the bat is, on the AI front, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to take some of these steps from the lean startup world and make them a heck of a lot easier with our AI engines that are now out there. But AI is moving so fast, and I am not by any means the AI expert. And so as we go through, if you have ideas or you've used something and you think it would be useful in this context, please let's put it in the chat. Let's come off of mute and talk about it. I know John's given a whole talk about AI before too, so I'm looking at him. It'll be fun to hear what you've got. And we'll kind of do this together. We'll make it a little bit of a crowdsourced presentation with the goal that you walk away with something useful that you can use and some next steps to actually move your idea forward. All right, so this is me, Maggie. Maggie introduced me very well. Thank you, Maggie. So I have in my past been everything from an engineer to a project and program manager to a vice president of software development in engineering and product. I actually just took a break at the end of May. So right now I'm lecturing at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I teach their computer science capstone course. And what we do with that course is we get company and nonprofit partners to come up with projects and mentors for the students. And then I teach Agile software development on top of that. So the students get into groups of 4 and 5. We actually use all of the things that all of you are probably using in your businesses with the hope that we churn out students that actually know how to collaborate. It was a pet peeve of mine that I kept hiring folks that like had never heard of Agile or didn't know and were kind of immediately against it for whatever reason. Now we're trying to kind of change that with the class. And so there's a lot that can be said about it. But if you have a company that's interested in doing something like a capstone, there's a bunch of universities across the country that are doing it. I think it's a huge win-win. Lots of recruitment comes out of the class and that sort of thing. So that's what I'm focused on right now. I actually use what we're going to talk about in this session in the class. So we do about a month of discovery where we talk about lean startup, design thinking. We run a modified Google design sprint to help the students figure out what they're going to build. And then we use Scrum and Kanban with 1-week sprints for the whole rest of the semester to actually get stuff done. So this is kind of a tried and true agenda. We've been doing this for many, many semesters, but also with folks like you who are out there with these ideas. I like to get started by finding out, for those of you that do have ideas that you're trying to move forward, what are those ideas? And I'd love to invite you right now to put some of them in the chat. It helps me figure out, okay, what are you interested in? Like, how can we tailor the session to make your ideas in your lives a little bit easier? So if you do have an idea, if you've got a startup idea or you've got a side hustle that you've been thinking about getting started, stick it in the chat right now. I'll tell you about a couple of things that I've been working on that I'll use as examples throughout. One is, let's see. Oh, so cool. I'm going to get distracted by all of your ideas. Ooh, a travel agent business. Ooh, we should talk. I love travel. So one of the things I'm working on right now is my daughter, who is 13, is interested in starting up an online business for her crochet animals that she's been making for a year or two. And so we've been kicking around ideas and how to get that started. So that's one thing. And that's really simple, right? That's not software related. That's just an idea that almost anyone who's got a special skill could have. And how do you get that started? Oh, very cool. So we got a realtor, photography business, design consultancy. Okay, so there you go. Renee, the other idea that I've been kicking around is I have just finished a book called Invisible Women. I forget the subtitle of it, but it's basically about how the lack of data around women and the way that we use products and the way like our medical needs and that sort of thing is really going to continue to be a problem, especially in the world of AI, for example, where we're missing some key data sets to make our lives and the lives of many minorities a lot easier. And I thought, as I'm reading this book, I'm like, you know what, we could maybe, put together like a agile or like a testing consultancy or something where we hire women and minorities and it could like staff aug the teams that people have that may not be as diverse. So I've been kicking that around for a while. Yeah. So women startup support. Cool. So we've got video games for clear exploration. Hey, Clayton. I was like, that sounds very familiar. I know Clayton. I love it. Data bias in a world designed for men. That's it. That's the subtitle of that book. Thanks, Paul. We've got companion robot for seniors. Yes. Ooh, Karthik, I know someone who's in that space. We might want to talk afterwards if you want to be connected. These are great. These are great ideas. And for those of you that don't have any or want to keep your secret, that's great. I think that gives me a good sense of where we're at here. So let's get moving. All right. So how do you think you start a successful business or side hustle? And feel free to put this in the chat too, since we're largely on mute right now. We'll start out with that question. And maybe that's why you're here. Maybe you're like, I'm not sure. I would like to figure that out. We will. Market research. Yep. That's a very common place to start. Courage. I love it. Yes. You need a ton of courage to get started. Concept validation. Bingo. Prototype. Pain points. Yes. Okay. So let me ask another question. How many of you, because I see this in your answers, are familiar with Lean Startup already? You could be maybe put in the chat, I'm a beginner, I'm intermediate, I'm advanced, I know all about this, because I had this idea that this group probably knows quite a bit about this versus some of the groups that I usually talk to. Beginner, intermediate, okay, perfect. So you know a little bit about this. Advanced, yes. All right, so to answer my question from the last slide, what do you need to start a business? Well, all successful businesses, of course, solve a problem for their customers. And so we've got to figure out what is that problem that needs to be solved and how do we come up with a successful business where people will actually pay money for it if that's what you're trying to get. If you're a nonprofit, of course, you're not trying to get money, you're trying to just solve that problem. But either way, we're trying to solve a problem for our customers. All right, perfect. And this is, of course, where Lean Startup comes in. So I see a couple of advanced, many intermediate, some beginners, but this is just a reminder what the Lean Startup process looks like. So if you recall, I'm sure many of you read I think it was 2011, 2013, Eric Ries's book about Lean Startup. But if you recall how it works is Lean Startup is basically the scientific process for building products. So if you all think back to your third grade science project where we used the scientific process, it's the exact same steps, just called something a little bit differently. You came up with a hypothesis. You decided, okay, here's how I'm going to test this hypothesis. You ran a bunch of test cases. You tested it with various people. You looked at the results and you decided, was my hypothesis true or false? And the Lean Startup is exactly the same way. And it's one of the best ways to go from having an idea for a side business or a side hustle to validating. I saw someone said to validate your product. That's the right answer. To validate that this idea is working and that people will pay for it. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to start the Lean Startup process together and give you ideas for how to do this, not only well, but as efficiently as possible using AI. And like I said, I'd like to do this in somewhat of a interactive way. So I've got a quick, like maybe 1 minute activity that we'll do kind of separately, but together. So the first step, if I go back to this slide, the first step in Lean Startup and the first step in trying to validate your product idea is to generate your assumptions about it. So your assumptions And you might not even know that you're making these assumptions, but your assumptions might be things like, hey, I'm assuming people would actually pay money for this. I'm assuming that this type of person might want to use my product or service. I'm assuming that I actually have the skill set to be able to build this. And there's just a bunch of different assumptions that you're probably making around this idea that you have. And so the very first step we want to go after is trying to generate a list of all of those assumptions so that we understand, okay, what do I think is useful? And then really dig into those and figure out, okay, maybe some of these assumptions might not automatically be true. Maybe I should actually go out and test some of these. So I'll give you a minute or less to write down, maybe on a piece of paper, you could use the chat, write down as many assumptions as you possibly can about your idea if you have an idea that you've brought today. And I'll give you just a little bit of time to do that. And feel free again to put these in the chat if you want to share. I always like seeing what kinds of assumptions people have. If you read my slide, you'll see I called this the old-fashioned way. We're generating assumptions using our brains the old-fashioned way, not using AI yet. Yep, Steve, I agree. There's a market for your niche, yeah. Yeah, Robert, that's very good. Big open questions around how to get these things done if universities will partner with you. Yep. Oh, Ben's already like ready to go on the next thing. Love it. Yes. Yeah, Renee, that's a really good observation. One assumption might be that this is actually a painfully expensive problem, something that like people really want you to solve so that they'll actually pay money to do it. They can't just solve it themselves. Okay, these are great. These are great. And John says, ideas. Yep, competitive differentiation. Yeah, who are your competitors? I'm assuming that I'm the only one out there doing this thing, but is that assumption correct? Probably not. Probably not. We can learn from our competitors though. All right, we'll move on here. So great. I hope you found a list, and I hope you have like 2, 3, 5, maybe even 10 things that you were able to write down. If not, that's okay. But the idea behind assumption generation is really this is no time for you to judge yourself, judge your ideas. Just writing down those assumptions and getting them out is perfect. So now I pulled this quote from an article that I read in preparation for this, actually. It was an article from TechCrunch about a year ago, and they were interviewing Steve Blank about, how is AI going to affect lean startup? And he had some really big ideas, but he also said this, and he said, we're collectively underestimating the potential of generative AI. And I 100% agree with him. I know I am. I know I don't know half of what I could be using it for today, not even to mention what's going to happen in the future. So for those of you, and this would be a good thing to also put in the chat, I'm curious, what's your experience with AI? Are you using it for almost everything that you're doing now? Are you, having it help you with a few emails, maybe a presentation or report, or are you not quite ready to jump in yet? I made this slide for anyone who hasn't really messed around with it very much. These are some of the common and free AI engines that are out there that you can use readily, and why I like, oh, that's cool, Wendy. What I like about this is that you can do a heck of a lot without spending a lot of money. And when you're just getting your idea off the ground, the last thing you want to do is make a big investment before you've actually validated your ideas, or before you've been able to build, like someone had said, a marketing and a sales system and something that will actually help you. All right, so some of you have used a few things, doing it on a regular basis. Good. Yeah, I feel like I'm underutilizing it still. I use it for a lot of writing projects that I do right now. And now I'll be able to use it for some of the lean startup work that we do with the class. So I recommend all of you go to one of these links, go to ChatGPT or Gemini or any of these, and I'll actually, whoops, I will go out there and let's see what kinds of assumptions this AI engine can come up with. So what I'm using right now is I'm using ChatGPT, and I didn't even log in. I just said, hey, forget about it. You don't need to know who I am. I just want to ask you some questions and I want to see what the results are. So I'm using the example of my like women only testing consulting company. And I just asked it in plain language, what are some assumptions people make when starting up testing consulting company? And here it comes in like 2 seconds. It's got all of these different ideas, and some of them overlap with the things that I've thought about before, and some of them are brand new, which is fantastic. And when you're using this, then you can kind of ask additional questions. So say, can you elaborate on the legal and ethical considerations? And it'll dive in even more and give you even more and more assumptions. And look how quick it worked. So when you're doing this assumption generation process, it's really up to you. You could do it the old-fashioned way and then use AI to kind of double check your math, basically. Or you could start with this and then dive in and try to prioritize these on your own. This happened so fast. I was so impressed when I first asked it. This is, hold on, let me get the slideshow back. A couple of things that I thought of that you could ask. You can ask about assumptions. You can ask it to dig in a little bit more. You can ask questions about your target audience, which might be one of your assumptions currently. You might not know whether that target audience is right. You can ask it about your competitors, for example. Because most search engines are using AI in the background now to answer your questions, I did a little test and asked about testing consulting competitors. I used ChatGPT versus just a Google search, and I got answers real quick. So wherever you go these days, you'll find some help. All right. Let's see. Get the chat back here. All right. So hopefully we're good on the finding assumptions. I think that AI can be incredibly useful, and it's a really simple example of how you can use it to enhance this process. The next thing you need to do, according to Lean Startup, is to find your riskiest assumption. And so of all of these assumptions that either you or your online helpers have come up with, you've got to figure out, okay, what is the one thing that if this is proven false, my whole business idea is toast. Like there's no way I can build this the way that I want to, because for instance, I can't make money off of it, or maybe this isn't the right target audience. And so you need to sift through your ideas to figure out what is your riskiest assumption. When I think about my test consulting idea, I think of maybe two things that could be possibly my riskiest assumption. One of them was that legal and compliance piece. Is it legal for me to actually hire minorities and women, given the fact that we all need to be equal opportunity employers? And the other one is, are companies really willing to pay money to supplement their testing teams with women and minorities? Do they really care about this? Or do I just care about this? And so that's got to be in place before this would be a viable idea, for example. So that's kind of what I thought of on my own. If I go back to my ChatGPT, let's go and say, which of the assumptions in the first question are my riskiest assumptions? Let's see what it comes up with. So it says market demand. Oh, it's got a unique expertise of women testers. This is a different one than I had come up with. Same with number 3. So it had some insights that did overlap with some of the ones that I had, but it also had some new insights, which kind of opens up my mind and lets me think through this a little bit more. So if you're following along, I invite you to go out to your favorite AI engine and ask it the same thing. Ask it, what do you think my riskiest assumption is? And see what it comes up with. And then ask yourself at that point, do I agree with it? Because in the end, this is only as good as the data that we have out in the world. So you always have to be a little wary of what you're getting back from whatever questions you're asking. And I'll talk a little bit about kind of the downsides of AI at the very end. So anyone have any questions or like specific issues that they're seeing at this point and want to interject? All right. Good, then we'll move on. So assuming you've got your riskiest assumption, how to test it. Yes, perfect, Wendy. Thank you for the push into the next part of the presentation. So yeah, so the next thing we have to do is take that riskiest assumption and test it. And we've got to build a test, and we've got to find enough people to talk to and test with in order to validate or invalidate that idea. So a good test, when you're thinking about building something, it has to do three things. It has to test your riskiest assumption, which sounds very elementary, right? But I can't tell you how many times my students, for example, will come up with the riskiest assumption, and then they'll just build a prototype of what they wanted to build. And it doesn't tell them anything about whether customers actually want it or not. Very, very common for you to like dive in and really want to, build something special that you think is perfect, but you have to ask yourself, does it actually test my riskiest assumption? It can be developed very quickly. And so we're looking for ways to develop tests in minutes, ideally. Hours are okay. Days are too long, usually. You want to create your test quickly so that you can get customer feedback quickly. And then, of course, once you do get to that testing phase, you've got to talk to real users in your key customer segments. You can't talk to your mom. You can't talk to people outside of your customer segment because they're not going to give you the real information that you need to move forward. You got to talk to people who you actually think you'd be helping with this idea, whose problems you're trying to solve. And there are a ton of ways to build such a test. And I'll just talk about just a couple of these. So, back in the day, the easiest way to build prototypes was maybe just to like write it on a piece of paper. You got a screen per paper. You can draw what a customer might see. You can put it in front of them and everything's really good. But most tests, from my experience now, are run via Zoom. So you'll find people maybe from across the country to talk to. And so you really want something that's online. So using a program like Figma or Balsamiq to create a high fidelity prototype is, in my opinion, one of the best ways to do this. That's if you're doing software, of course. If a lot of you had ideas that were outside of the software world, if you've got a real product, like say you've got this like awesome jelly bean recipe and you want to find out if people would actually be interested in it, you can create packaging from other packaging. You can come up with very unique ways to model your project, maybe even with like art materials, clay, that sort of thing. Whatever the case may be, you have to get a little creative in this case to figure out how to actually test your product and come up with that test really quickly. You do not want to spend a long time coming up with this, because if your assumption is false, you would have wasted all that time, right? A couple of other ideas that come straight from Lean Startup. The landing page test, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, where you put up a very simple web page that has a button at the bottom, and it asks people to either pay money, like here, buy this right now, or sign up for this, subscription to do something that actually means that they're very interested in actually buying your product. The very best thing you can do is ask them to pay money and then have a little pop up and say, sorry, we're not ready yet, but please sign up and put your email address here. We'll let you know when this is ready. And then you also start to build your email list. An explainer video is where you would take maybe a prototype or a couple of high fidelity mock-ups, and you would narrate via video what a customer might see as they go, so they can kind of see things in a richer format. And a concierge test is one in which you might take something that you would automate in the future, but you would do all of the actions yourself. So if you've got a service, for example, and it would be fully automated, what you're actually trying to build is a software product to do this for them. Maybe you would have, the very beginning ready and the very end ready, but in the middle, you're actually performing all of the actions there, just to see if it's something that they care about, it's something that works for them. So these are just a few examples of how to build a test very, very quickly. Now, I'll talk a little bit about how you can do things even faster with the new AI world that we're in. So I talked about using tools like Figma. And by the way, Figma seems to be the tool of choice for almost all of my students. It's very easy to learn, but also some of the professional UX designers that I'm working with have recently moved over to it as well. I think Adobe bought it, and so that makes it a little bit easier. But they've got a lot of these prototyping tools have AI built into it. So they'll help you generate images. They'll help you design a first draft, rewrite your copy, and just do things light speed faster than what you can do on your own, especially if where your talents lie might not be in designing images. I'm talking from experience here. Like, my talents are with software and logic and like that sort of thing. I am not a designer, and I would much rather not have to deal with that kind of thing. Well, guess what? I don't have to do that anymore, because I've got a lot of these examples here, and you can kind of take these down and try each one if you want. Images and videos can easily be generated now. I've noticed that videos tend to be a premium feature for some of these AI engines, unfortunately, but I did see that Canva will create videos right now. They'll give you a couple of tokens. Tokens is what they call it. And you can type in up to 5 words and it'll take it and try to create a video. I wasn't super excited about the video that I got out of it. I asked it, can you create me a video about crochet animals and include these animals? And all I got was like 2 seconds of a crocheted alligator moving its head around. It was like an albino alligator. But I think if I would have prompted it a little bit better, it could have created something. Oh yeah, Renee says she loves using Midjourney. Great, thank you. I didn't have that on my list. I'm going to show you Gemini was really impressed with. So here I am. I've come over to Gemini. I've done nothing. I haven't really logged in. It probably yes, it knows who I am because I have my Google stuff up already. And all I can do is say like, hey, would you create a example image of a package of spicy jelly beans? Let's say I've got this awesome recipe and I really want to start selling it, but I want to use this in my test, but I have no image, nothing to show anyone. And here it goes. Like, in a matter of seconds, we've got these. They're pretty good, okay, jelly beans, hot peppers. What if I like really want my mascot to be a kangaroo? So like, can you generate more images for spicy jelly beans that include a kangaroo? Let's see what it does. Oh, I can't wait. All right, there it is. All right. So we've got, actually, this is the least scary images I've gotten out of that. Some of them have like big red kangaroos trying to eat my jelly beans. These are pretty good. So if you need something quick, you need an image quick, something like Midjourney, something like Gemini can get it for you, and you don't even have to lift a finger. Now, you need to worry about rights when you're using anything with AI, but because you're not necessarily selling at this stage, you're just using it for testing, you in general don't need to worry a whole lot about what's being put on your images or what you're using, because generally you're going to throw this away and create something from scratch later on. And that's kind of the nice thing about using AI for Lean Startup. Last thing I'll mention is for website creation. If you're going to do a landing page or you're trying to create your website after you've validated things, gosh, there's so many great features out there. I've noticed it on my WordPress blog. They now allow me to like I'll ask it, hey, what do you think I should call this article? And it'll come up with about 7 different titles that are way better than the one I had. They'll proofread it. They'll write it for me if I want it to, and I don't want it to, but it will. But all these website creation companies have come out with layout, copy, image help, SEO help. And I just wanted to show you the beginnings of this kind of marketing video from Squarespace, which is one of the big website creators. What I like about Squarespace or Wix is that not all of us are developers, and creating a website can sometimes be very daunting, but these companies make it pretty easy. And then they've also layered in the AI for you. So here's what you can do.
Use
Hopefully you can hear
Squarespace
that.
AI and supported text series to generate text from prompts or rewrite text you've already written. This is a great way to get a first draft of the copy on the page or get ideas about improving the copy you've already written. To use Squarespace AI, click the lightning bolt icon in the toolbar of the selected text box. The prompt field will appear with pre-built prompt starters like paragraph, pitch, or blurb. Enter your prompt and click Write. After the text is generated, make sure to review the results and the text support generated what you.
Okay, that's probably good. I just wanted to give you a sense for how easy some of these features have become, especially when you're trying to work on a website or you've got a blog or that sort of thing. Oh, let's keep going. So I'll pause here and see any other questions or any other ideas. That Midjourney was a very good suggestion. Like, how do you get more info on the landing page test? There's a couple of books that I know include a lot of info on it. I think Lean Startup does. Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week goes into it really in a lot of detail, and I think what he talks about is still relevant, even though that book's pretty old. I talk about it a little bit in my book, which is Agile Discovery and Delivery. I've got a link on the last page, but you can probably also type into Google or an AI engine landing page test, and you'll probably get almost everything you need to know about how to generate that. And we can stay after and talk about it too. Let's see if I missed anything else. Yep. Okay, great. So now we're at the point in Lean Startup where we've got our riskiest assumption. We've got, oh yes, I love strategizer. Great. Riskiest assumption, we've got a test that we built and we need to test it with people and measure the results. When you go into a customer interview, it's really important that you let them do the vast majority of the talking. You want to ask a lot of open-ended questions, and better yet, the thing that I teach my students to do is take this test that you've created, which more than likely for them, because they're in software, are high fidelity prototypes built in something like Figma. Take that, put it in front of the user, tell them to tell you what they're thinking the entire time. So to try to use it as if it's an actual system that's been built, to tell you where they're confused, what they like, what they don't like, what they're thinking, so that you can get a sense for how they're interacting with this product. That's a great way to glean a lot of information. Sometimes people, if you ask them questions, will tell you the truth. Sometimes we don't want to hurt your feelings, and so they don't. But when you have them walk through something like that, you get such rich data. Now, you can ask AI engines to help you prep for these customer interviews. Where can I find this type of person? What kinds of questions should I be asking around this subject? And I think it'll be very, very helpful. But I am not at the point where I can recommend you asking it, what would a bunch of customers do if I put this in front of them, right? This goes back to that missing data piece. We're missing a bunch of data. We don't have rich data on all customer niches. And so there is nothing, I think, that can replace actually talking to customers in your target audience at this point. So while in that article that I was talking about where Steve Blank was kind of prognosticating about how AI will help us in the future, he did talk about, oh, you know what, we should be able to use AI to test hundreds or thousands of people in a matter of seconds. You know what? That's probably coming, but in my opinion, it's not here yet. And so we really need to talk to people. We really need to get that rich data from actual people. And so make sure you do that. Take notes throughout the interview. Get comfortable with big silences on your part. You want to create a space where they're talking, you're not talking, and record the interview if you can. So if you're doing it via Zoom, which most of you probably will be, that's just record it so you can go back and look at it. And then when you're done with all of your interviews, and by the way, I always have my students do about 10 to 12 interviews in a week. That's a decent amount of interviewing to start to see trends in terms of what the customers like, what they don't like, what's working, what's not working. I know in Steve Blank's boot camp that he does for Lean Startup, it's a 12-week boot camp, and he's very emphatic about the fact that the students that do the most interviews, and they do about 12 every week, these successful students are the ones with the most successful products at the end of the day. So the more people you can talk to, the better off you're going to be. Now, when you've talked to all those people, you've got a bunch of results. So you might have notes that you've taken, you might have recordings, et cetera, et cetera. AI can absolutely help you analyze those results, and I think would save you possibly hours. So AI engines can take notes for you. I've got a couple of examples of things that are either here, or I think the Zoom AI companion is coming out soon. Then you can take all of your notes and all of that data and just ask an AI engine, could you summarize the results, pull out key learnings? You can spot check and make sure that what they've come up with is good, but I have a feeling it'll be actually very, very good. You can also ask AI to tell you about areas where it just doesn't think you have enough data. Maybe you need to go talk to another couple of people in this area or this area, for example, and it'll save you lots of time. Now, I promised I'd get to this, and I do want to underscore some of the downsides of AI, which I've alluded to throughout this session. You know, we have to worry once you're getting into actual product building about IP concerns, for example. So if you're asking AI to create you images or to write you something, you need to know where that data is coming from so that you know that you have the IP. So if you're using images, you can ask an AI engine to use the common open licenses that are out there. I'm forgetting exactly what that's called. Maybe someone can correct me in the chat. To make your image so that you know that you own those rights and can kind of use it moving forward. But just keep in mind that that is a concern. Data bias, I've talked, Creative Commons, thank you. Thanks, John. Yep, that's perfect. Creative Commons license is what that is. Data bias I've talked about a lot. Like, we're missing so much data in the world. Until we fix that problem, AI is always going to have a data bias. And so we need to be aware of that, especially if our niche is anyone that's not a white man. Right now, we got to go out and talk to those people because we don't have enough data. AI also makes stuff up and doesn't cite where they get it from. And so we need to be very careful about the things that we use. And so let's make sure that we do that. There's a cost if you want to use some of the more powerful AI features as well. So my recommendation is to start out with the free ones when you're doing your lean startup rounds, and then move into something that might be more expensive once you start making money. And because of that data bias, there's clearly a lack of creativity sometimes. I think AI for the most part has done a fantastic job of really enhancing the things that I want to do, but it's still not as good as like the things that come out of our own brain. So always check the results, always do your own research to help supplement this. And then, so for next steps, and I'll look back at this chat because it's totally gotten away from me at the moment. But for next steps, so what we've done here in the workshop today are more or less the easy parts, right? So we generated assumptions and we found our riskiest assumption, and we talked about building a test. And so the next step for you would be to take that riskiest assumption and figure out, okay, how are you going to build a test? And then to go out and build it, go and run it and learn from it. And then we tend to not have enough information or still have very risky assumptions after one round of lean startup. And so it's really important that this be an iterative process, just like all of our sprints and everything on the teams that we generally work on. It's not enough just to test your riskiest assumption. Well, if you've proven that correct, then you need to go back and test your next riskiest assumption, and then the next one, until you get to a point where those assumptions just aren't that risky anymore, meaning that they won't kill your idea. And so throughout that time, I would be very surprised if your idea made it through the ringer in the exact same form that it is right now. You're going to learn so much throughout that time that one of your assumptions might be proven wrong. And if it is, that's okay, because you've got all this extra data and all this great information about what works for your customers or what problems they actually have. And so you can pivot and maybe do something a little bit differently using that data that you have, and then run through the lean startup process again. So repeat and iterate. And then the very last thing I like to add is, you know what? I find that starting anything, a new project, a side hustle is so much easier with a partner or a coach or an accountability partner, just someone who's there to kind of challenge me and to make sure that I'm staying on track and that I'm not letting it fall by the wayside. So, my one of my big suggestions for all of you, if you're thinking about pursuing this and moving forward with your idea, is to find someone who will be there to ask you, hey, how's it going? Someone to be an accountability buddy. So this could be a spouse or a friend or a partner that's actually going to be a part of the business, or it could be a coach. And I've had an executive coach for many years and have been really happy with them because what they do is they give you the space to think through problems that you might not be able to find time to think through at any other time in your life. You're busy, you've got family, you've got your job, everything going on. That space and then that accountability that they create, because we'll come up with next steps just like we're doing here, and then we'll move forward with that. It's priceless, honestly. But that's about it. Actually, I'll leave you with this. If you want to know more about this process, I talk about it a lot in my book, Agile Discovery and Delivery. It also talks about the basics of, Scrum and Kanban, things that most of you are very familiar with. But what I found is this book is not only really great for new engineers, which is who I teach in my class, but also the people who are adjacent to us in our roles, the people that don't really get it. So my CEO, for example, I think got a lot out of it. Sales, marketing, support, you know, whoever is somewhat interested that you wish knew a little bit more about agile software development, that's who this book is for.